Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world. Welcome to another Operation Separation. It's been a few weeks. I'm glad to be back. And joining me this week is my special guest, LJ Finney of In18. Today, we're going to be talking about letting go. So we can approach this from several different angles, including the anxiety shitfest that I'm navigating right now. But I want to give LJ an opportunity to introduce herself and tell you all a little bit more about the work that she does. So, LJ, welcome to Operation Separation. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you. Why don't you take it away?
Well, first, thanks, Shell, for inviting me and for bringing me on today. Really excited to be here. Honored to be a guest. And, we have such a serendipitous story around accountability. Telling you a little bit about myself, I started my career in finance and technology. Actually, I started in technology and then moved into finance and worked on Wall Street for some time doing project management and technology implementation. I decided, why not bet on myself? And if I'm going to work this hard, why not work for myself? And started my own company In18. And the vision was to help people, make deeper connections to themselves, to understand who they are, and leadership development was the focus. But then I realized that profitability was in project management combined with that, as well as some operational work and just helping people get out of their own way. And what I found is like a constant theme is self-sabotage, and we don't even realize it. And it goes all the way back to like our childhood, like not studying for an exam and then just waking up the night before, partying all night and still showing up at class. And it manifests itself in so many ways. So I'm excited to be here with Shell to hash it out and help you all hear how we've done it or what we're still working on.
Yeah, I mean it's an ongoing thing, right? Like so even the most successful people probably still self-sabotage a little bit. Like they get in their own way, they get stuck, they keep doing the thing on the hamster wheel that's like super comfortable instead of getting off that I can't even speak this morning, hamster wheel to try something new. And I know for like some of the conversations that you and I have had previously, um a lot of this looks like productive procrastination. We've talked about that recently, where we feel like we're getting things done, but they might not be the right things that will move us forward in our business professionally. And we've talked about eating the frog and what that means and like doing the hard thing first thing in the morning. Because, yeah, we could know exactly what we need to do, but sometimes we do all the easy things first because we're like, okay, let's get things checked off. And then even though we know what exactly the thing is that should be done, we still do the other things. So eating the frog first thing in the morning is like, get that harder task out of the way. Because honestly, like when you procrastinate, like, don't you just feel better once you finally do the thing? Like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? What was I waiting on? And I know another thing that like you talked about, this stems from childhood or like things that you've done all your life. And I know for a really long time, I always waited till the last minute to study for tests. You mentioned like waiting, not studying for the exam, showing up anyway, like partying all night. That was never really me, the staying out all night partying type of vibe. But like I always waited till the last second to study for a test or to like cram or do my homework. And even if I had been working on it little by little leading up to that point, I did the majority of like, all right, let's see what information I can absorb in these next few hours. Um, and I did really well for the most part, following that way of being and like getting things done. And so even though it served me really well for a really long time, I developed that habit of waiting to the last second and reinforced it by saying, I'm really good under pressure. Yeah, I'm really good under pressure because I put that pressure on myself.
Yeah.
So when other people started adding pressure to me, I was already a pressure cooker waiting to explode because I had built up that whole like vibe of like, yeah, I'm going to wait till the last second because I know I do better under pressure instead of giving myself the opportunity to get it done sooner. And I know you've been navigating this a little bit as well, with like putting in proposal requests and like even if you have it on your calendar, you're still waiting till like the day before you have to mail it in or the day before it needs to arrive, and you're like, there's no reason for it, right? Like we've
Yeah.
called each other out on this so many times where we're like, we have everything we need right in front of us. What's stopping us from getting it done sooner? And so that's some like several of the ways right there that we self-sabotage in our lives and professionally. Um how's that going for you, by the way? Like, do you find it easier now to like eat the frog, or like are things still coming up? Like what's been in your way?
Can we talk about how I don't even like the phrase "eat the frog"? It already sounds like uncomfortable. We need a nicer, like, add honey or a little bit of a spoonful of sugar. Like we need a better saying. So like put a pin in that we need to come back and find a nicer way to make this more palatable. Yeah, it's hard. I think what we start to recognize is that self-sabotage has a negative connotation or a name, and so it makes it hard to accept that that's what's actually happening. But it's almost like when I look at those scenarios, I think, well, what am I so afraid of and what's really holding me back? Like, what is the thing that is stopping me from submitting that RFP or really working on it and giving it my all? And then the universe allows us to still succeed. So it's like a false sense of accomplishment, but how much better could it have been if we've given our all? And I think there's some fear in the fact that like your best is not going to be good enough. So you'll give the least, and that's great. And then there's a celebration that you were able to accomplish it. And it's almost like very self-defeating if you think about it, because it's saying maybe what I have is not good enough. So I won't put my effort in and all of my effort. And if I get it, that's good enough. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. It's the best that I could have wished for considering what I've done. And how do we like start to become aware of that when it's happening and think about how do we transform it? And what I love about like our dialogues is that it's accountability. It pulls the cover back to look at, well, why are you really waiting? What's holding you back? What is stopping you? Are those other things more important? I'll give an example of productive procrastination. It's like when you're sitting and you know you need to write an email or a letter, and then all of a sudden you feel the need to wash all your curtains, or you feel the need to clean every single corner and
You
crown mold
I
it.
hope I'm
Like,
not the only one
why?
laughing at this because we've all done it.
Why? Like, why is it all of a sudden important for me to like clean the grout in my tub? Like, I've looked at the tub every single day, and then suddenly it becomes important. I'll give you an example where it recently didn't pay off, and I recognize like you're doing it again. Stop. I decided that I needed to wash my clothes, but I also needed to move the car. And I decided that I was going to magically wash these clothes 45 minutes before it was time to move the car, knowing that the cycle is not quite 45 minutes. I got a ticket in the end because I didn't move it. We were on the phone that day, and I'm like, this is my fault. Like, I knew I needed to move the car. And then I magically needed to do laundry. No, I didn't. And these are examples, and it happens. So those are like personal life moments, but it happens in our career. And I think that and it happens in our jobs, and it happens as an entrepreneur. And I think it's harder as an entrepreneur because you're self-motivated. Everything you do and everything about your business is going
Yeah.
to be driven by your effort. And if you make excuses and you don't recognize them as excuses, like I'm going to build all this content, or I'm going to get certified in all of these things, but you have no clients. You have to do the client work. And that's the hard thing. So, what I've recognized is it's important to share what you're working on and to a certain extent and be able to kind of have someone hear it out loud to know when you're making excuses. So, how many times are we making excuses that sound like reasons, but they're not necessarily real reasons? They're things that we're actually doing to sabotage ourselves. Sabotage sounds like you're like falling on a sword, but it's not. It's not that. I just watched the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon. So, swords were very big in the episode. So it's very fresh in my mind.
Yeah, I speaking of falling on swords, I was trying to think of the words to describe this. I feel like, and maybe you can relate to this too, like as a career success coach. I know what you call yourself is a little bit different and you coach in a slightly different space. But as a career success coach, I walk a fine line of showing people that vulnerable side, and I do that without unapologetically. Like I'll show you my flaws. I'll show you when I'm having an anxiety attack. Check my stories this morning if you're not sure what that looks like. Um I've cried on camera. I don't script things because I don't want it to feel rehearsed or forced. Like it it just everything comes and flows naturally. But the double-edged sword of this is that like, and this is another way that I hold myself back a little bit, is when I'm showing you all the muck that I go through and how I come out on the other side, or how I build up my resiliency and take courageous action and do the thing. I sometimes wonder if like the people that are watching, which are friends, supporters, loved ones, but they're also people that need to hear this message. And as much as they need to see me taking the action that I stand behind, like my words have actions and I want to walk the walk and talk the talk and have them both coincide. But are they sometimes seeing the shit that I'm going through and they're like, well, how I can't work with her yet because she's still going through this, or because she doesn't look like she has her shit together. Well, if I showed you only the pretty things of my business, if I showed you all the good things, and so, yeah, I love, I love to drop the confetti and celebrate all the wins and the little things so that we have something good and positive to associate with. But like, you need to see the shit too. So it's a very fine line of how much shit do I show you?
Yeah.
How much of the negative stuff that I'm working through do I show you, so that you not only like trust me, but that you want to get to know more and you're like, "Hey, I'm going through this too. Let's work on it together." And so I am towing that line quite often and I'm like, "Ooh, did I reveal too much? Did I push it too far? Is there a better way?" And that's part of the work that I do too on myself and with clients is like, I'm helping people find their way. Let's figure out the shit together. Let's work through that muck. Let's go through your own ups and downs so that you can find what works for you. Because what I'm doing isn't going to work for everybody. It's not going to work for most people because it's my thing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's easy for me to say, I'm still working through a lot of stuff. Do I think that I'm still working through some burnout? Absolutely. Am I performing at 100% all the time? Hell no. And I can honestly admit these things because I don't want to be fake. I want to be real and authentic all the time, but I also recognize, and my partner pointed this out just last week. He's like, "You still call yourself a people pleaser, even under the guise of a recovering people pleaser." And I think that's holding you back. Those were his words. What would it mean to, and there's other umbrellas that I put myself under as well. A recovering perfectionist, like me having a panic attack this morning about like my background and feeling like I'm in a dark, dingy like dungeon a little bit. Okay, well, I've got one of my, it's white, but it's still a bright white. It's still my brand color. It still makes some light come, and come to life. So like letting go of the things that I attribute to myself, even if they feel real, I think will help me let go of some of the shit that holds me back.
Yeah,
And just hearing that from other people, yeah, you called them excuses. I didn't even recognize that it was an excuse. I might find all the ways to defend why I'm still a recovering people pleaser or a recovering perfectionist or procrastinating on something. Like, it doesn't feel like an excuse to me in the moment. And so I recognize that it's helpful when other people call me out on my shit. And that, to circle back to what it means to have accountability partners, it's not just in business, it's in life. And it's people that you can trust to give you feedback when you need to hear it most.
absolutely. You said something very like powerful. There's this question around like how much vulnerability do we show and how much of ourselves do we share with the public? Like, is there fear that this will be used against us in a future moment? Is there fear that people won't trust us because we're going through something? And I think, someone gave me feedback and I still struggle with it because I also am not always willing to share that. Yeah, I do might look it may all look successful, but there's a lot of self-sabotage that happened along the way. And while it turned out well, there are a lot of things that happened that may have impacted how well it turned out. And so what I think about is with the vulnerability piece, people work with humans. They like to feel some sense of, familiarity. People want to identify, and if their struggle is similar to yours, then that person will be part of the community that is either improving you or that you're improving, because you're kind of sharing, this is how I got over that. And so I recognize myself in this. And they will see themselves and they want to get to where you're at now, because they may be in the beginning of that journey. But if you never show or share the journey, then the concern is that this person doesn't get me anyway. Like everything in their life is perfect. They'll never understand what I'm going through. So I think that there's a value in sharing, our vulnerability and sharing our situations where we're going through it. I think one of the situations or one of the challenges I find for myself is the same. How much do we share of those personal things? Does it impact I guess it doesn't impact the qualifications, because you are who you are, you know who you know what you know, and you're able to deliver the results. And it's being able to remind ourselves that this is what I can deliver. And despite going through all of these things, success is still possible. And it may look different for each person, but you can accomplish.
For
It
sure.
might help you become a stronger person. The other thing I wanted to touch on that you mentioned, and I think is rather important, is also kind of thinking about who you are as a brand, right? For someone to have success in their career, they're going through the ups and downs of dealing with different people, dealing with toxic work environments. Like, people don't leave jobs just arbitrarily. They leave for reasons. They want more money, they want more respect, they want a bigger title, they don't like the people they're working with. It doesn't align with their lives, their personal, like their integrity, whatever their moral is. So there's a reason, and that's messy. And we need to give ourselves space and not self-sabotage and ignore it, because I feel like ignoring it is another form of self-sabotage. And you start to think about, like, how many other ways am I doing that? And one thing I will ask is, if there's something that you need to do, one of the things I like when I coach clients or coach people or coach businesses or small businesses, the question I'll say is, well, what is the most important thing you need to do next? And what are the feelings that come up around that? Because that's where you start to uncover, like, the anxiety and the fear. I'm afraid they won't answer the phone. I'm afraid they'll think I'm stupid. I'm afraid and there's a lot of negative self-talk that pops up when people are willing to express what those things are. And then the next question, what is the worst thing that could happen? And what is the best thing that it can happen? And it's a 50-50 turn. You just won't know. So
Yeah.
now, what do I need to do to get to that next step? And so really just kind of sequentially, if you do that for every question or task that you need to, you'll start to see how many stories we're making up that aren't true.
Yeah. And to your point, like if the feeling that comes up and the fear is, what if they don't answer the phone? My immediate response to that is, what if they do answer the phone? And
Yeah.
so then your follow-up question to that, what's the worst thing that could happen? They answer the phone. All right, and then I have to do the thing. And if the best thing that happens is they answer the phone and then I have to do the thing, then either way, you're taking action to do the thing, because what's the worst that could happen is, like, you get to move forward. You get to get over that hump and get to the next thing. And so, yeah, I love your questions about, like, what's coming up for you. What's the fear there? What's the feeling that's preventing you from taking that action? And then, like, all right, well, what's the worst and best and worst case scenario here? All right, well, what do you need to order in order for you to do that thing?
Yeah. Can we talk
What do
about
you
the fear
need
of
right
success?
now?
Can we talk about the fear of success? Like you mentioned, what if they answer the phone? Think about how many times we've self-sabotaged and don't even realize, like, it's almost, it sounds odd. There are
We
so
talk
many more
ourselves out of
people.
winning.
Right. We talk ourselves out of winning. And it's like, are you afraid that people will be jealous? Like, what is the thing that makes us so afraid of success? What's happening?
Yeah. Something you said a few moments ago was about taking recognizing what you need. I can't remember your exact words, but what in the workplace, and, like, if it's not working for you, then leave it, or, like, if taking accountability for yourself to recognize that there's some discomfort there, that it's not working, that you know you deserve better, that you want something different, whatever it is. And there's, the buzz that's going around right now about quiet quitting. Well, there's a reason that that's happening. And it's because, and this is not the only reason, people feel overworked. They feel overwhelmed with their workload. They keep taking on more, whether by their own pressure that they've put on themselves or by way of the company and management and other people seeing that, yes, they seem to be able to handle these tasks. Let's pile more onto them because, the reward for doing a good job is to do more of that job.
Yeah.
So quiet quitting isn't about screwing other people over. It's about recognizing that we deserve better for ourselves and we don't need to overwork in order to get it. Because there's so many people who have mastered this already and probably don't even realize that they're doing it in the moment. But when we're let's talk about something that I used to see all the time in my previous job, my previous work, was that I felt like I was doing all the work all the time, doing everybody's jobs, never letting any balls drop, and then being really mad at the people who didn't seem to give a shit. Well, why aren't they doing it? Well, they know that if they don't do it, I'm just going to pick up the slack, right? But like, they're still skating by. They're still getting recognized for the minimal contributions that they are making, and they're probably not even giving a second thought or worry or concern that they're leaving on time every day, that they're coming in on time, that they're not working after hours or answering calls or answering emails, and they're not overexerting themselves. They're also not burning out. So there's something to that. And probably the resentment was more like, how can I be like them? How can I do less and still do more? How can I get further in life and feel good about it if I'm just doing the bare minimum? And I think about it now and I'm like, I had no business being mad at any of those people because they had figured something out, whether by their own recognition or admission or not. And I wanted that. I wanted more of what they had. And yet, in the moment when I felt overworked and felt like it was partly their fault, because why aren't they doing a damn thing? I was jealous of them and I called them lazy. They weren't lazy. They knew exactly what they were doing or not doing. And so there's something there that I'm like, oh my God, I wish somebody had been like, just take a chill pill, drop some balls. The world's not going to crumble.
So it's so funny that you're saying this because I feel like my work career, I think that's where we get along even more so because I feel like my work journey was very similar, being the overachiever and the concept of quiet quitting, like that's existed, but I never felt comfortable doing that because it felt passive aggressive. It's like either you're here or you're not here. And what I started to notice with the people that did the bare minimum or they weren't staying as late as I was or they weren't doing the same thing, I'm like, we're motivated by different things. And I think what I started to pay attention to was what motivated them. And I said, you know what? They want to get home because they want to see their kids. They want to make sure that they can do homework with their kids. And I started to pay attention to, well, what is their priority? This work is just something that they're doing to maintain their lifestyle. And for each person that I felt any hint or tinge of frustration around, it forced me to become more self-aware about like, well, what am I envying really? Because I also have the choice to do this and this work will be here tomorrow. And I think the first time, so this is not necessarily along the lines of self-sabotage, but it kind of is. The very first time that I recognized that you have to make and respect your boundary around work and time, there was this woman that she was being treated for breast cancer and she kept coming back to the office and she was like a managing director and like she came to the after work drinks and I'm like, why is she here? But the reality was I think it gave her a sense of purpose and gave her a way to to just escape what was really happening in her life. And it was the fragility of life, the fact that like I've created this career, I've built my life around this, it is my priority. I don't think she had children and she was married, but I think I was still at Barclays or whatever company I was at, and she worked really hard to get that MD title. So for her, being present was still important, and she really had just an amazing disposition. And you don't see a lot of female leaders in that role. And unfortunately, she still passed. But I used to wonder, like, why would you want to be here? But I realized later that for her, that gave her, maybe it gave her a sense of purpose. It gave her a way or out, an outlet. And so like
Yeah.
even when we're at the space of quiet quitting and we're thinking about it, I started to wonder, have people just started to prioritize themselves and prioritize like their lives? And then they start to realize this company doesn't care about me. If I were sick, and COVID is the first, I mean, COVID was the eye opener, right? The fact that people were sick, their families were dying, like family members, and so many things were happening in life, and companies weren't really responsive. It was still all about the bottom line. And when you start to think about like if you don't prioritize yourself, then who will? And self-sabotage even comes in that way as well. It's the people that used to come to work sick. Now it's do not come to work sick because you will take out an entire office when
Yeah.
and potentially kill your coworkers. Like talk about passive aggressive energy, like people coming in to breathe on other people because they don't like them. Like so many layers to that. So I'll pause there because there's this space around it's okay to choose you, but it's okay to understand that sometimes people are choosing work because they're avoiding what's happening at home. That's what I learned with the people that were overworked and trying to like push me to work harder than I was already working hard. And I'm thinking, look at what's happening with you that I don't want to sleep here. I don't want to be here overnight. Like, what are we
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. And recognizing on some level that like I was the job. I didn't have anyone to go home to. I mean, I have family and I have friends, but like I made work my priority. And I expected that other people around that I surround myself with had the same priority. And recognizing that they didn't. People were living their lives. They were living their best lives, or maybe or like living the life that they could within their control, within their means. And I I wish these conversations happened earlier on for myself. And so that's why they're so powerful for us to be talking about it now, because maybe you're in a situation where you are resenting your coworkers or the job for putting too much pressure on you, but how much of that could you let go of? Coming back to today's topic, how much of that like is really put on by other people and how much do you put on yourself? And letting go of what you can't control, letting go of the things that don't serve you anymore, and taking back control of the things that you want in your life and the priorities that you want to put first and the things that matter to you. We talk a
Absolutely.
lot about like doing more of what you want to do, finding your way, doing what feels good, focusing on what you can control, and letting go of the rest. And I think it's finding that work life balance of like what matters to me and how am I going to structure this. So that's a lot to unpack there. I want to open it up to the audience, to anyone that might be listening now or catching us on the replay. What are some of the ways that you notice that either you're self-sabotaging or people around you are self-sabotaging? And how do you navigate that? Is it something that you're like, let's let it go? Or are you like, all right, I recognize that this is happening and I'm just still going to keep doing it because this is what I need to be doing right now? Because there's a level there of knowing that something doesn't work.
So it's funny you
And
say that because wait, I want you to also add because we're self-sabotaging in one category, we could be super successful, but we also could be self-sabotaging in another area. So you said something very valuable that I don't know if people were hearing, like you were pouring all of yourself into work because there wasn't like necessarily a personal situation that you needed to deal with. But what I learned is that sometimes we're self-sabotaging other categories of our life and succeeding in one area, but self-sabotaging the other. So like it's like the circle of life. What are the things you prioritize? Family, relationships, work, vacation, and all of these different things. And you start to see, wow, I'm super accomplished here, but I'm sabotaging all of my personal relationships because I've prioritized this thing. or I'm sabotaging all of my family relationships because I prioritize these things. And I've decided to skip every holiday because for whatever reason. And you start to think about it. If you're excelling in only one category, then that may actually, all of that success may actually be self sabotage for something else. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
so the
And
question I
and
ask in the audience.
even if you're taking time for yourself and prioritizing family and friends, going on trips and going on vacations, but like you're working the entire time or you're still dialed in and not powering down and building up those other relationships and filling your cup in those other areas that you want to have in your life, then like you're self-sabotaging those other relationships in those other areas, but you're also overworking yourself in the one area that you've made the priority. And that's when, you come back from a vacation, you come back from a few days off and you're like, "Oh, I need a vacation from my vacation." Or like, "Oh, I shouldn't have taken those few days off because now I have so much extra work on my plate." Or like, "I'm going to have to play catch up and it's never going to end. I'm always going to be behind." And like, yes, on the one hand, I was conditioned to be that way, to like, have you checked in with work? Do they need your help? Is there anything that's like, what fires do you still need to put out? And I was very much like, always, let me check my email. Like, are you doing okay? Did I save all the files for you properly? Like, what do you need? How can I serve you even on my off time? Well, like, what would it have looked like if I could just be like, oh, they'll figure it out on their own. They'll be okay without me for a few days. And then you got back, or I got back from that trip, that vacation, and like didn't feel bad about taking those few days off. Wasn't mad at myself for having to play catch up. And then taking that to-do list that seems never ending of like, all right, here are all the things that I missed out on that I have to now do and like complete because they didn't get done while I was out. Being kind to myself and being kind to yourself to be like, I'm here now. I'll do what I can. I'll do one thing at a time and I'll focus on what the next priority is in front of me. And if the list gets done, the list gets done. And if it doesn't, then it'll still be there tomorrow. So self-sabotaging on all ends of the spectrum looks like not being kind to yourself and giving yourself space and time and grace to do the best that you can with what you have at that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Grace. We talk about that. We talked about that a number of times. Like, where's the line between grace and then just like not doing something? And how do we figure out where we are in between those moments? Like, am I giving myself grace or am I making an excuse to not do the thing? And so being able to kind of walk that line and toe the line and understand what's coming up for me. So if I recognize that there are a number of other things happening, and I'm like, that's not giving myself grace, that's making an excuse. And you're right, we have to be kind to ourselves because we're also experiencing life, right? There's so many other things that are happening around us, for us, within us. And we also have to kind of moderate like what's important in this moment. I wanted to kind of skip to something that also ties into self-sabotage. And you talked about burnout. It's the power of, accepting what the universe gives you. And so saying yes, but then it's also knowing when to draw the line and start to say no and understand like when is it that I'm accepting all that the universe has for me or I am protecting my peace and saying no to things that are not going to help me. And that's not self-sabotage saying no. Sometimes no is a preservation of your peace. And that is actually giving you grace. And so I wanted us to talk about also just the forms in which self-sabotage is in accepting and trying to moderate, like, or trying to, we said people please, but also client please. Like you and I have talked about the clients that drive me into a space because it's not aligned with my like just how I am. And I recognize that it's important to work with people that understand or that are in alignment with, for me, structure. So I'm a project manager by trade. I like structure. I follow a pretty standard schedule of things. I lay out things very, straightforward. I give people options. And I recently had a client that was like all over the place. And I thought, well, I think you brought me on for structure. So at a minimum, let's honor the fact that this is what will bring us to the next place. Self sabotage was if I would have accepted all of the nuances and jumping through hoops and moving around, because I wouldn't have been able to manage any other client and I wouldn't have been able to have peace. Because, if we're structured and we're meeting on certain days and this is your time and this is when you get your updates, but you're never able to meet, I understand the need to be flexible. But then my question was always, how can I ensure that they get the information they need without changing too much and disrupting the flow and having to rearrange everything else that I'm working on? So self sabotage can come in the form of not knowing how to deliver, but still trying to meet the goals and you're knowing how to deliver, but not knowing how to meet the expectations of others when they're not necessarily, when they're self sabotaging themselves. So I said that in
Yeah.
a weird way, but
And
you're
doing it in a way that still felt structured for you.
right, right. But what happens when you're dealing with clients that are self-sabotaging themselves? And now you're aware of it and you recognize like you're not, do you call them out? Do you not? So it's a very like once you become aware of when self-sabotage is happening, you start to see it in others. And it's such a delicate fine line of making them more aware because is it your job? Is it your responsibility? Or is it like your moral obligation to keep your own peace to make them aware that, hey, this project is due and I'm the person that's helping you manage it and just wondering, do you want to take a look at that? What's coming up for you? How can I help you? How can I support you? How can we
Yeah.
ensure that this gets done by this time? That's the kind of language I use to help nurture or help people identify when they're holding themselves back. It's a
Yeah. It's so interesting to like toe that line with a client because you're like, on the one hand, they hired me for this, but I see now that this is going on and they might not be aware that that's happening or that they're doing it. And they also might not be ready to receive that feedback and accept it, and they might not be ready to make any changes, and you can't force that upon somebody. Like, people only make changes when they're ready to make changes. You
yeah,
like, no matter how hard you want them, you try, or you really want like somebody to do well, and you see all the ways that they can improve and like make progress and have success. But like, if somebody's not ready to see it, and I speak for myself because I'm good at accepting feedback and receiving it, but I'm not good at receiving gifts, but they're the same thing. It's two
yeah,
sides of the same coin. So like, there's only so much you can push on somebody if they're not open to receiving that. And if the structure is what was initially brought on and they're still blind to this other thing that they really need in order to have the structure in the first place, then like, you're fighting against the current. Like, it's and so what's where I'm going with this is that you recently shared with me something that somebody had said to you, along the lines of, you're always quitting.
oh,
And I think I called you out on it, and I'm like, but you're not. You're doing what serves you. You're taking control, you're setting your boundaries, and you've defined it for yourself in a way where like, if this doesn't feel good, why do I need to stay in it? And I wouldn't consider that quitting, because you're establishing your boundaries even firmer, right? You're learning what you need in the moment, and it's okay to let go of the things that don't serve you, that aren't working out, that aren't in your best interest. And it's also okay to change your mind,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
so where I'll tie this back to like my own work too, I was in this job for 13 years. Um where I just felt like I needed to stick it out. I felt like things will change eventually. Things will get better. I mean, it was drilled into my head that this is how it is. This is how it's always going to be. This is how things like that it things this is just what it was. And yet I had this sense of loyalty to like keep going because I'm not a quitter. And I didn't want to leave them in a lurch, and I didn't want to let anybody down. And you know what? Like, I don't consider my quitting, my exodus, my operation separation, um, I don't consider that quitting. I consider that I decided that it was time to make a radical change in my life, that I deserved more, that I deserved better. And even if I couldn't see what that looked like yet, I knew that, like, if I stayed, I was quitting on myself. And I didn't want to do that. So if somebody is going to give you feedback and call you out and say that you're always quitting, no, you're not a quitter. You're choosing you.
So can we talk about choosing you as so choosing you makes other people uncomfortable because they may not be choosing themselves. And so they're not identifying what's happening. There were so many gems that you covered. So definitely let's put a pin in and come back to coaching insights because you're right. The art of being a coach is helping people discover them on their own because that's the only way it's going to be actionable. Like a person is not going to action feedback or something that is received. It's only when they discover it and kind of go through all of the permutations in their mind to come up with a conclusion that they're going to act on something. So you're absolutely right. Like you could see it like bright as day. Hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. But if the person doesn't see it, they're not going to get it. So they have to almost come up with the conclusion on their own. And that's by way of asking open-ended questions. But the person that said that I was always quitting, what I recognize is that there is and this is not our topic today, but professional gaslighting is real. Like there are people that use terminology or say things to you because they know what your triggers are, or they know like if you have specific morals or foundational things that are inherent to who you are, like I like to see things through. As the project manager in me likes to drive success by completing things. Like I feel a sense of completion. Yes, I'm a checklist person. I'm a person that is managing things and writing things down, even in my own life, and I feel good about checking them. And knowing that about my personality, or knowing that I get called intense, and I'm like, no, I just follow through. I don't think that's intense. That's called committed. There are other words, but what I recognize is professional gaslighting is a thing. It's words, saying, phrases, idioms, like things that people say about you to get you to do something else. It's very manipulative, and you don't always see when it's happening. You become defensive, and that's what we could say. Like, what's coming up for you? What are you feeling? Because if you can identify what you're feeling, then you'll understand that that's not really about you. That's about that person and those sayings and that feedback. I feel like one of the things, and you and I talk about this all the time, is that I am always open to receive feedback when it's constructive. So, how can I do better next time? So, what can I do different? So, when I thought about that after that statement, my thought was, so in other words, you want me to continue on this project, then it would behoove us to do the things necessary for this to continue. Because if you're not going to meet any milestones, then you don't need me. You've made a choice that you don't want to succeed. And now I'm looking at your self sabotage in the mirror, and it's impacting my own personal goal of achieving whatever the thing is. And so it's like this weird, messy soup of people that are just experiencing emotions, but not dealing with them. And we're whole people. So to your point about vulnerability, we have to bring who we are to the table and put it out front and say, like, look, one of the things I pride myself on is structure. And one of the things that will make us successful is that you'll always know where you stand, will always be present, and you can always rely on the fact that I'll be here at this moment at this time. And if you can't make it, that's fine. There'll always be a recap that'll allow you to know what the next step is. And that gives people a sense of peace and comfort. Whereas, the individuals that say you're always quitting, I'm like, well, yeah, when things don't serve me, and they don't serve us in the greater whole, and it becomes more of a nuance, like a nuisance than a solution or a support. Why should we continue? What's coming up for you? Why do you think that this is a good idea? And it happens with our workplace. It happens in like our family situations. Like, you've got those scenarios where you recognize that I can only really spend a good hour here. And then I need to remove myself because I know that there are other things I haven't dealt with that this is probably not going to be the time to deal with them. So let's figure out how to make the best of a situation. Self sabotage would be staying there longer than you should.
Yeah. Yeah. And whew, Staying there longer than you should. Uh, I you there were so many times in those 13 years where I was like, "I think I wanna leave. I want something else." There were several times along in that timeline where I actively searched for other jobs, thought about moving to another place, even asked them like, "Hey, can we open up a branch here? So, because 'cause I'm thinking about moving here and I still wanna do this work with you. What would this look like?" And being instantly shut down. But, like, there were so many, I don't necessarily wanna call them red flags of, like, I need to exit, but there were definitely other pockets of time where, I wanted to leave. I knew that this was not the way, and I still stuck it out because I was comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm,
And I think that's a fear that a lot of people have is like, "Well, I don't know. It's the unknown. I don't know what's out there. I don't know what's happened, and I'm good even if I don't like what's happening here, I still know what it is." So I think there's someone who said to me one once, I've probably heard it a million times, but one person in particular is sticking out to me. They had said, "The devil I know is better than the devil I don't know," or whatever that quote is. And so they chose to stay in a situation because, yeah, I know what I'm dealing with here. I know how to fight these battles, even if I'm not getting the outcome or the change that I want. I like it's and that's why people stay in relationships for far too long. That's why people struggle to get out of those relationships after they know it no longer serves them. And this is personal and professional and any way that you're navigating it. But like staying for way too long needs to change. And if we can have the awareness, the self awareness to recognize that we deserve better sooner, then how much more successful and confident and comfortable could we be in our success? I had put a poll out there recently in the last few weeks asking people to give feedback and to let me know, which operation separation have you liked the most so far? Like what conversation really resonated with you? And I gave some options based on the ones that I could see had the most attendance, the most viewers, the most eyeballs. But it's open ended if something else resonated with somebody. And the one that people said out of all the conversations so far, this one really like nailed it. And it was the believing in yourself operation separation. And what I recognized in that moment of see, I had no idea. I've liked every conversation because, well, I like having these conversations for change. And I've had great conversations with all my guests. I would prioritize the conversations with guests over doing them solo because that's not my comfort zone. Like I feel more energy and more positivity and radiate here in this space with someone else before I go down this rabbit hole. My point is that believing in yourself was not necessarily the episode that I would have picked. And yet when I saw that that's what resonated with people, I recognize that that's what these conversations are all about. Doesn't matter what the actual topic is from week to week. We're talking about ways to believe in yourself. And letting go is a way to believe in yourself. Letting go, stopping the self-sabotaging habits is a way to believe in yourself because when you're doing those things and ruminating and like dwelling on the discomfort and the things that are going wrong and calling yourself a people pleaser or a perfectionist, you name it. We've covered so many things in this conversation and more. On some level, all of that sabotage, all the things that are holding us back is because we don't believe in ourselves. That we don't believe in ourselves enough to do the thing that we actually know we want to do. And I'm not even going to say that we need to do. The thing that we want to do. We hold ourselves back. And it's because we don't believe in ourselves enough to do the thing. So, how can we have more of these conversations? How can we help people believe in themselves more?
So, Shell, I want to pause on that because, I don't know if you planned that segue, but it's awesome, and I know we're about to run out of time. But self sabotage is due to a lack of belief in yourself. And it's hidden, and sometimes we layer on conceit and confidence and arrogance, but deep down in the core, there is a little seed of doubt that's trying to grow like a weed that really is impacting our ability to move forward. And so a few things that we have to kind of think about. I mean, it's cheesy, but I think our affirmations are real. Like the I am statements, because they remind us in our lowest moment. And I tell people this, or at least when we're coaching, like if you can just write down things that are true and positive about yourself in the down moment, refer back to that list, because you're not going to be able to think of it in the down moment. In that moment where you're doubting yourself, when you're questioning, refer back to your I am list, because in a high moment, you thought of those things of yourself. You believe those things. So let's go back and reevaluate those beliefs. We fall off the wagon all the time, whether you're dieting, exercising, we get off track. So how do you get yourself back on track to continue reinforcing belief in yourself? And honestly, things that are happening in life are eroding you, right? I needed to be reminded that I am not a quitter. And like, I know this, like bizarre that it even like, but in your low moment, things that are designed to chip away at you will. And it can kind of set you back if you don't have one, a supportive network that truly believes in the things that they're saying about you. Two, belief in yourself, or ways to recalibrate and realign yourself to get back on track. And so whatever those things are, whether it's that song that your kick-ass song that's gonna hype you up, if it's the affirmations that you've written down and kind of put to the side and referred to in case of emergency, like where you're in. For me, when self-sabotage comes up, I do share it, and then I do ask, what's the worst that can happen? And once I go through what's the worst that can happen, then I force myself to think, well, what's the best that can happen? What is the best outcome? Leaving a job, the worst that can happen is that you don't find another one. The best that can happen is that you have the space and the time for the experience that you couldn't have done if you had a job. And so that thing will present itself. Also, knowing about yourself, like, look, I'm smart. I finished school. I work hard. I understand things and see things that other people may not see the same way. And so that gives me an insight that's different. My experiences are different. And in a space that it matters, someone will value that. And maybe that's enough. And maybe I am enough. And then that allows you to kind of step in and do that scary thing. And then the other thing that I do to fight off self-sabotage is just kind of think, if it's happening right now and I need to do it now, just do it now. Like, don't wait. Just do it right now. If it comes to you, that could be a little like, you can kind of get a little distracted when you do that. But if there's something I'm thinking about, just do it in the first 5 minutes. Like, just do it. Don't think about it. Don't ruminate. Don't write it down and come back to it, because you'll always make an excuse why not do it. Like, if you're going to send that email and it came to your mind in that moment, do it in that moment, because otherwise you'll find reasons not to. So where I can, in that moment, pause and do the thing that I'm thinking about, because there's something about it that I know that I'm going to make an excuse. And so when I think about my tools and strategies to avoid self-sabotage, it's asking what's the worst that can happen, and then focusing on what's the best that can happen, and what do I need to do that. And if it's something I can action right away, don't procrastinate, because I'll find a million other things to do instead. Just do it. And then you and I have our goal of do the hard thing first. Like, first thing in the morning, before I'm fatigued. There's this book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, and he talks about there's decision fatigue. We face decision fatigue. And that's why by the end of the day, people want to go for a drink, even if they stop drinking, or they do the things, they don't exercise at the night because they exercise in the morning, because they want to get it out of the way before they can make excuses of why they can't do it. So decision fatigue is real. And another way of self-sabotaging is delaying things till the time that you have no more energy to make a decision. So those are my personals.
I'm pretty sure you just covered this. So me asking the question is beating a dead horse, but let's beat it anyway, shall we? You just gave some great tips about ways people can stop self-sabotaging and take more actionable steps to get where they want to go. and you broke it down in a very clear, concise way. What about the people who don't recognize that they need that help yet? Like, what would you say to your younger self
Oh,
to take the action now, to do the thing, to get started, to let go, to stop self-sabotaging?
ooh, yeah. Sometimes we're not ready for the lesson. Sometimes, like, we have to go through the bumps and bruises to come back and look and understand like where we need to be. For my younger self, or for people that are like in the midst of it, just start paying attention to when you're compromising or when you're not making a decision, when you're inactive or you're making a decision super fast and you're not necessarily thinking through like what's the best that can happen, what's the worst that can happen. Honestly, I think I needed to experience all of the things before I could get to this point. And so I think being aware of what's happening, don't let life just happen to you, but experience it, reflect on it, don't dwell on it, but think about like, wow, my boss gave me this feedback, or wow, I'm thinking about quitting my job. Honor those thoughts, these instincts, these things that come up in your mind, honor them. Like, don't ignore them, don't suppress them. Let them come up and let them spin. It's so uncomfortable. Like, we don't like to experience our emotions. Men, women, we just kind of flow through things and we like the hamster wheel because the hamsters like the hamster wheel. Like, let's just be honest. They don't say, I need to get off of this. They say, let me get on this. And they like running. So we like the hamster wheel because it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's routine. We're not getting anywhere. But do you think the hamster really cares? Do they
Yeah.
care?
When
They
you're in
like to
that
be.
confined space of like your little hamster habitat, you're like,
Yeah,
all right, if this is the change that's going to happen right now, I'm at least running in a circle. Like I'm at least getting some motion in place as opposed to just laying around and doing nothing. So you feel like you're doing something. But
yeah.
like,
It's like a treadmill. Like, let me just get this running. They're not
yeah,
upset about it. They're not. But what we see from the outside looking in is that if the hamster was aware that he's just running in the same circle, would he make a different choice?
yeah. And would he try to climb out of that habitat to experience something different?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say stepping outside of ourselves as decisions happen and just reflecting on them and being honest about it. Like, note it, make a note. Like, I think that, everyone, well, maybe people don't use paper, so maybe use your like phone notes. But when you feel something, just make a note of it, because when you come back to it weeks later, months later, you'll realize that there was something there. There's this thing that Oprah used to say. I forgot what I was listening to. Maybe it was like one of her Oprah own talks. It's like the whisper, she called it. And so you can Google like Oprah the Whisper, and she talks about how like there's like this tapping first, and then it's like a slight breeze, and then suddenly like there's a aha like loud banging noise, and it's the situation where we've ignored our instinct. So it's like we get that first sign, then we get a second sign, and then we get this undeniable thing that happens that now you have to react. And I think if we learn to hear the whisper or hear that or feel that emotion, we'll make better decisions. And I think that that's something that we can all kind of focus on. So that would be my feedback.
That I'm being open and taking note of those moments when something's coming up for you or recognizing how you're reacting or what you need that you're not allowing yourself to have, I think is such a powerful message for our younger selves. Um, and also knowing that you can still have structure while you're creating change. Like it doesn't have to be as free flowing and open ended as you might be thinking that it does. So if you're looking to add some structure to your daily life or to your business, to whatever it is, personally, professionally, this is something that LJ helps so many people with all the time. She is great at creating that structure and helping things become more streamlined. And yeah, as a it's a great project management tool. It's something that she does really well. Even in the moments for herself when she doesn't think she has any structure, it's still there. So LJ, where can people find you if they want to learn more about how to work with you, how to bring you on in a consulting or coaching capacity? And where's the best place for them to connect with you if that's not the same place?
Okay, well, thank you for that. I'd say our home is LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn and I can share well, it's just N18 LLC. And I'm sure, Shell, we could put it in the show notes, but you can book a meeting with me directly on my website. You can DM me directly from LinkedIn and make sure you refer or reference that you heard this on Shell Station. And so at least I know, like, what did we talk about? What are we thinking about? So, there's peace and productivity, and being able to like really think about it. Predictability gives peace. Productivity is tied to predictability. And sometimes all of that ties back to just having a plan.
Yeah. And as you and I say all the time, we gotta keep it simple and strategic. So that's what structure is, keeping it simple and strategic. Don't overthink it. Getting out of your own head. This is a whole other conversation
This
because
is a
I've
whole
just
other one.
gone down
I
a
mean, we
whole
can
other
go
rabbit
on and
hole.
on.
So
We can even we
we'll have
can,
to plan for this at another time because yeah, this is just too good to not talk about it more. But
I'll leave you with one pin. One of my self-sabotaging moments that you called me out on was when I was playing too much golf. The thing I loved became me self-sabotaging because I was avoiding the things I needed to do by doing the thing I loved. And that was probably the most insightful moment where I'm like, okay, you're playing too much golf during the week. Therefore, you're not working on and you're avoiding something. So let's just say it can be the thing you love that is also causing the self-sabotage or a sign of it.
yeah, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form to wrap put a nice little bow on letting go. I'm not telling you to give up the golf. I'm not telling you to let go of it. But there's ways that you can have fun and do the thing you love and still be successful and move forward in your business to also do more of the things that you want to do. And yeah, I love having these conversations, even our accountability calls, because we keep each other in check. We make sure that we're okay. And that's so much of the work that we do with our clients too. So,
Yes.
if you like having these conversations, make sure to connect with LJ so you can have that structure conversation and what that strategic planning would look like for you. If you want to connect with me and go down that rabbit hole of like, what do you need more, want more of in your life, and in a way that you feel good about, feel free to reach out to me. My DMs are always open on LinkedIn, Instagram, even if you want to hit me up through shellstation.com. But either way, let us know what conversations you want to have more of so that you can make change easier and actionable for yourself. And how can we support you so that you believe in yourself more? Let us know in the comments. This has been another Operation Separation Conversation for Change. Stay tuned for more. Make sure to follow along, and we'll say bye for now until next time.